Good morning and welcome to tomorrow's headlines today. To some of you, it's not quite morning. It's more like nighttime, late nighttime, or afternoon or something. It depends on where you're watching from, which I'm not expecting a whole lot of people to be watching right now. It's literally exactly 5 a.m. I've been up for 4.5 hours praying this morning in tongues, in the Spirit, and I'm going to deliver to you a message that is one of the things that keeps me from getting invited to churches, keeps me from doing interviews with people in the mainstream, typically, regarding the topic of Nephilim, Gibborim, hybrids, etc. Because what I have to teach is only taught by a few people, and it is so different from what you're used to hearing in the mainstream church. Not that it's a new revelation, but it's a more accurate revelation, I would say. So, without further ado, let's talk about it, shall we? All right, let's pop in. If you'd like to partner with us at all, contribute to this ministry, any of that, you can do that right there. You can also get our book, where I teach a lot of this stuff, in our book on Amazon. Let me drop a link here. It's called The Mark of the Beast from Creation to Revelation. Now, some of this might be stuff that you haven't heard. Okay. So we're going to... There, look at that. It pops up. First thing. We've actually sold quite a few copies of this book, but, you know, we really only make like $2 off of a book. Maybe $1 off of a book. Not much at all. But here's the link right here. I love having a MacBook and an iPhone because I can just copy something on my phone, and if I'm near my computer, I can paste it right from my phone onto the computer. I love that. That's awesome. There's just so many reasons why it's better to have Apple products than Androids. Now, don't get me wrong. The processor in Galaxies is amazing. The picture quality, camera quality, megapixels, screen size, everything is like that. Technically is better than Android, but what you can do with an iPhone and how you can have everything linked together is amazing. There's so many things that I can do with this that I couldn't do with anything else. All right. The Mark of the Beast is the numerous link technology. Nope, it's not. Why do people believe the Mark of the Beast is 666? Because it is. It's not Nero. All right, people, I'm going to stop the comments. I'm glad that you're making your comments. I'm going to stop reading the comments until after I'm done. All right, so let's talk about this. The Mark of the Beast, etc., fallen angels, etc. Okay, number one. We're going to have to go to Genesis chapter 6, and we're really, in order to do this, we're going to have to start at Genesis chapter 4. And that's verse 26, and we're going to have to break that down for you right there. So Genesis 4:26, it's the last verse of the chapter, very easy to find. It says, "And as for Seth, to him also a son was born, and he named him Enoch. Then man began to call upon the name of the Lord." So we're going to start right here, because this is important. We have to read this and understand what's going on here. It says, "And as for Seth also to him," so it says, "Ula shetgam hu yulad ben wayichra et shemao Enosh, az hu chalikro bashem Yehovah." And then there's a pay at the end, which means end. There is nothing else to be added or taken away from this. This is the end. Start a new paragraph. These do not run together, right? Whenever you see that, it means this is the end of this. Now we will move to something new, okay? Now what it says in Hebrew, it is he named him Enosh. Well, the name Enosh means mortal man, okay? And before, if you read, mostly men was called Ha-Adam back there. So now there's a separation between the Ha-Adam and the Enosh, right? There's the word as, which means then. We go and look at the meaning of it according to Strong's Concordance. It means beginning for, or from, or hitherto, or once, or since. So this is the beginning, for, from, or hitherto. This isn't saying then, all right? So what it's actually saying is beginning, or began, and then the next word, huhal, and that is translated as men began, but that does not mean men began, okay? In Strong's Concordance, if you look it up, the Strong's 2490, it means to profane, defile, pollute, desecrate, okay? To pollute oneself ritually, or to be polluted or defiled, to make common, to wound fatally, to bore or pierce as with a sword, right? So you make a hole, you penetrate, you pierce, you wounded somehow. And then it says the likro, which means to call, and then bashem, Yahovah. Okay, so when it says bashem or likro, we would typically see likar, likara, likro, and the variations of it, and think that means to call upon, right? Well, what it actually means, according to Strong's Concordance, and it's the strongest definition here, is the first one, is to bewray self, which means to betray. Betray means to trade, exchange, or give up something for something else, or to alter something, right? So they betrayed what? It says they betrayed Bashem, in the name of Jesus, in the image of Jesus. What does the word Shem mean? So we'll take a look. Shem means infamous or renowned, so they traded the infamous or renown of him. Shem also means a mark, a memorial, or a conspicuous position, authority, honor, and character. So when you receive the mark of the beast, you're actually receiving the mark of his name, because it's the mark of what? The mark of the name. All right? Well, let's see. Those that received the mark. And it's interesting that you should ask this, and that it just kind of ties into here so well. Let's go to the New King James Version, see what we can find here. Got to get to the exact right chapter here. 13:16. All right. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell, save he had the mark or the name of the beast. So Revelation 13:17. So let's take a look at that in the Greek. Don't you think it's interesting that they were altering the mark or name of God, and then all of a sudden, in the end of days, they're taking the mark of the name of the beast, right? So when you take a look at this in Greek, it says, Kaihina metish dynate agorase Ipolesai e mecho echon to chargama to onoma to therio, the mark of the name of the beast. It literally says that in Greek. They have to receive the mark of the name of the beast, the therion, right? Now, if we look at this word onoma, right? Onoma means name, character, fame, reputation, renown. According to the Strong's Concordance, let's see what also it means, right? And it's very similar to what they were doing, what they called on the name, which is the renown, the mark, the image, right? And this is the mark of the name, okay? So what are they doing? They're altering or transforming something in exchange for something else. Isn't that quite interesting? So people say, oh, the mark of the beast is a technological system. It's a chip that's planted into your skin. Well, that's probably part of it, but that's not the mark. The mark is the alteration of DNA. All right? Now we're going to get into that because we'll get to that when we get to Genesis chapter 6 and 4. And also you have to remember Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, the curse of the seed of the serpent, and where does all that come from? And we'll get into that in a second here. But I want to talk about the Gibborim, the fallen angels, etc. Okay? And we'll try and keep on track here. So we went through, they began to bore or pierce themselves, right? So then we're going to go to Genesis chapter 6. And keep it, the word is chet lamed, okay? And it's pronounced chalel, chulal, etc., okay? So we're going to take a look at that. So they began to alter, pierce, or transform the name, mark, image, renowned of God, and betray. They began to betray the mark, name, image of God, and huhal, alter, pollute, transform. Genetically speaking, we still have pollution of the DNA. What is DNA pollution? Okay, listen to this. DNA contamination or DNA pollution occurs when DNA from an outside source mixes with the DNA sample being tested. So, when let's look up what is polluted DNA. Enter. Polluted DNA refers to DNA that has been damaged or altered by exposure to environmental pollutants such as chemicals, air, water, pollution, etc. And what happens is it changes the DNA sequence or its epigenetic modification, potentially impacting gene expression, potentially causing health issues. So we still have genetic pollution that's happening today. And what were they doing? They were polluting what? They were polluting the image of God. Well, what's the image of God? Me and you, what we look like, right? It said they began to call upon and profane the name or the image of God, right? And that is what it says. So we'll go back here. They began to call upon the name of Jehovah. All right, so they began to, and that word for began means to profane, defile, pollute, desecrate, to wound, etc. Okay, right? And that's that word huhal or hulel, however you want to say it. And it means they polluted something. They polluted the image of God. And to profane something actually means to do something to desecrate the outside of the temple. Well, what does it say our bodies are? We are the temple of the Holy Spirit. We are the temple of God. We're also bricks that make up the temple. We are what the New Jerusalem is made up of. Let's take a quick drink here. All right, so we see there's an altering happening. All right, now let's go to Genesis chapter 6. Now remember the word chalel, and we're going to go to Genesis chapter 6, verse 1. A lot of people just skip over this, right? And I've heard Ken Johnson teach on this, Chuck Missler, Michael Heiser, L.A. Marzulli. All these people teach on this, and a lot of times they skip over this, or they don't know the word that's there, and they haven't seen it and put the correlation together, because what happens is you're taught to think this is what mainstream teaches, so therefore this is it, period. And I've heard them say the term sons of God always means fallen angels, and I'm going to refute that with biblical backup to support it, okay? So we go into Hebrew, and it says, Vachikai Huhel. So, and it came to pass, when began, what? Ha-adam la-rob, when began man to multiply. Well, that's that same word, Strong's 2490, chahel, which means to profane, defile, pollute, desecrate, dishonor, to treat as common, etc. Now, there's that same word there. So we've got altered. So it says here, when altered the man multiplied, al panei, on the face of the earth, cha adama, ubanot, and daughters yuledu were born lachem, to them. So when altered, people who altered the image of God, the mark or renown of God, the Bashem, began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them. So there's the altered humans. And then it says, if we go back to Genesis chapter 4, verse 26, it says that in those days is when they began to alter, when Enoch was born. Well, that was 128 years, or 138 years, something like that. So it was between 120 and 130 years after the fall of mankind that they began to multiply and alter the image of God. So in that time, we're at Genesis chapter 6:1. We're given a good, clean documentation from Genesis chapter 6, or Genesis chapter 4, verse 26, ending off. Then it goes through the genealogy of Cain and the genealogy of Adam, right, through the line of Seth. And then we get to Genesis chapter 6, where it explains, now here's what was happening at that time. And the chuchal ha-adam, the altered the man, the altered men, is how we would say it. Men, the men altered, la robe, multiplied, on the face of the earth. Al panei ha-adama, and then benot yuledu lachem, daughters were born to them. So then we go back. What does the next verse say, right? And the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Well, angels aren't marrying anyone, okay? Fallen angels especially aren't going to marry anyone. They don't give a crap about that. That's following the laws of God, right? It says in Daniel 2 in the dream that in the end of days, the 10 kings, the things they mix, there's the Nahash, serpent kingdom, etc. It says that they don't mix together and they don't get married. Well, if you assume that the fallen angels are aliens, then why wouldn't they just continue to procreate with human women like they were doing in the past? Why is it now they suddenly don't procreate or can't procreate? Why do they always have to take people's DNA, take people's seed, and create genetically altered or modified beings in order to preserve their species, according to what they say to those people that they've abducted? Well, let's look into the Hebrew. It says, Vayiru b'necha Elohim. Okay, now that says it's a noun masculine plural. The b'nei is a noun masculine plural. It's actually singular or plural. We see this in Daniel chapter 4 when it's talking about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And this is written in Aramaic. And it says, hey, didn't we just throw 3 men into the fire? Then why do I see a fourth who looks like the B'necha Elohim, the Son of God? Now we know that since he's saying a fourth, that he's not saying there's multiple sons of God in there. He's saying there's one person who looks like the Son of God. B'necha, if we were going to say it in Hebrew, B'necha Elohim. How about the fact that Jesus is called the B'necha Elohim by demons, the Son of God, and that in Luke chapter 3, when it goes through the genealogies, it goes all the way down through Seth, who was the son of Adam, Adam, who was the Son of God. The what? The B'necha Elohim. Okay. So we're starting to hit on something here. Wait a second. I thought the B'necha Elohim was always referring to angels. Well, that's weird because Paul completely contradicts that and says no angel has ever been called a son of God. They aren't made in the image of God. Technically, they don't have free will quite like we have free will. They follow orders. They take commands. They're obedient. They're a little bit different than we are. They look a lot like us as human beings. Sometimes they don't. But they're not. And in heaven, nobody has private parts. It is what it is, right? So they saw the sons of God, the daughters, Benot Ha-Adam, that were beautiful. Now, what daughters are they talking about? They're talking about the daughters of the Ha-Adam. Well, in verse 1, it describes that the daughters of the Ha-Adam were the polluted, genetically altered, or transformed image of God. They altered or transformed their image. And that their daughters are the ones that the B'nai Ha-Elohim were marrying, that they were reproducing with. And it could be that this was anybody who was doing the will of God at the time, because if you go back to Genesis chapter 4 in the beginning, Cain and Babel were doing the will of God. They were making sacrifices. They were doing what they were supposed to do. And God said to Cain, I'm not going to accept what you're giving me. This is the fruit of the land that you've worked with your hand, that you produce, and it's not even the best of what you have to offer, versus the blood sacrifice that was given by Habel or Abel, which actually means the Lord. So the Lord was slain by the seed of the serpent, if Cain was the seed of the serpent. And they had their beautiful daughters. So they were doing the will of God. God still came down and spoke to them at that time. So people were still doing things that were right and righteous. Or it could be talking about Adam that was reproducing all of a sudden with the serpent for some reason. Or even Eve that was reproducing with the serpent. Because Ha-Adam doesn't just mean in Genesis Adam. Ha-Adam is what God called Adam and Eve before the fall. The name Eve and the word woman, Ish and Chava, both came from Adam. He said, I will call this one, not Ish, Isha, wife, woman, daughter, whatever. I will call this one woman, Isha. And then he said, because she's the mother of all, I will call her Chava. So Adam, Aha-Adam, and Chava were Chava and woman were names created by Adam, but God called them Ha-Adam, the man. So the B'nai Ha-Adam could have been the ones that were doing it also, and there's reference to that in Genesis chapter 3 when it says they saw each other's nakedness and they were embarrassed because they were naked. Well, they were naked together and seeing each other's nakedness in Genesis chapter 2, and there was no shame. And it makes a very clear point to say that they had no shame seeing each other's nakedness at that point, right? So they saw that they were beautiful, tabot, and that's an interesting word just in and of itself. Pleasant, agreeable, beneficial. Let's get a real good look here at what this word means. Beautiful, the best, better, bountiful, cheerful, at ease, fair, etc. Okay? Now, Naamah is the last one in the daughter of, she's the last one mentioned in the line of Cain. Naamah means what? Beautiful. So they saw a Benot Ha-Adam, a daughter of the polluted men that was beautiful. Naamah. Well, in old Hebrew tradition and in the Kabbalah, which is the Gnostic mystic version of what they teach that Naamah is the mother of demons. Well, demons are the disembodied spirits of the hybrid beings that were mixed together, right? So let's keep looking into this, shall we? All right, so we're going to go back here. That's not the right one. Okay, so they had these beautiful daughters that they married, took whomever they chose, okay? Then we go back again, go to Genesis chapter 3, and it says, the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. Let's take a look at that. It says, Vayomer Yahovah lo yadon ruchai, my spirit, ba Adam le'olam, besagam, chubashar vachayu yamal mea va'eshrim shana. Okay, And said Jehovah, not shall strive my spirit with man forever, for indeed he is flesh, and yet shall be his days 120 years. So that's when he decided. So this coming generation is only going to live 120 years. Like, we're going to cut that down. He doesn't give a time frame of how long it's going to take, but it takes less than 400 years for that to happen, right? In Genesis chapter 4, it says right here, Ha Nephilim Chayu. They were. The word Chayu is from the word Chava. They lived, they existed. It also can mean they fell out, or something took place. Okay, so something came to pass. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days. Well, the word Nephilim comes from, and they translate this a lot of times in your modern translations as the word meaning giants. That's not the case. It doesn't mean giants. It comes from the word nephal, which means to fall, a fallen one. And this is something that we see in Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12. It says, How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, O shining star, son of the morning. You have been thrown down to earth, you who destroyed the nations of the world. Okay, well, let's take a look at that in Hebrew. It says, eknephalta, eknephal. We say, oh, how you are thrown down. Well, it's translated as thrown down, but what it means is nephalta. You are fallen. Mishemayim chalel. You are fallen, Lucifer. You are fallen Chalel, which actually is the name of Satan. That's his name. It means more shining one, or bright shining one. All right, it comes from the word halal, which means brightness. But they say, oh, it means the morning star. He's not the morning star. The bright and morning star is Jesus. That's not a title that's shared with Satan. So how you are fallen, how you are Nephilim, Nephalta, from heaven, Lucifer. Well, what's Lucifer? Or Satan? What's Lucifer or Satan? He's a fallen angel. And it says that in Isaiah 14:12. Who was the first fallen angel? Satan. So we have established here, if Satan is a Nephilim, then how is it his hybrid offspring are Nephilims if they were never in heaven in the first place? They were born here on the earth to mortal women. Just something to think about, something to ponder on. And we go over that and like just skip over it and miss it completely. But here it is. It says eknephalta, and it's Strong's 5307. Nephal. Well, let's take a look at Genesis chapter 6, verse 4 again and see what it says here. Ha Nephilim is 5303. Now it's funny because when you go to the next one, wait a second here. Where was I? Isaiah, right. I lost my spot. Was it this one? Was it this one? Strong's 5307, Nephalta, how you have fallen. Comes from the root word fall, nephal, to fall. And it's the same word that they use in Greek, pipto, which means to fall also, which they again translate in Greek as meaning to be cast down. So who was cast down, or Nephalta, in the book of Revelation? It was Satan and who? His angels. So we see here very clearly that the Bible outlines that the Nephilim are fallen angels. Right? So they weren't having babies. It wasn't the Nephilim who were getting married. It says it was the sons of God who were getting married. Well, who are the sons of God? Well, we established that a little bit. They're human beings. It's like when we go to Job chapter 1, chapter 2, we see that the sons of God, or son of God, is taking their stand. I believe, personally, my opinion, that son of God, that B'nai Ha Elohim, is Jesus, and he's interceding for humanity, for mankind, because that's what he does. He intercedes for us. He's our intercessor. He's the only one that intercedes for us. And then in Revelation, we see that it says Satan, who accused us before God, was cast down. Well, the Bnei Elohim were doing no accusing. It says they came, or he came, to take his stand, or to take their stand, right? So if it was Jesus, he came to take his stand, and it says to advocate for oneself. To advocate. Well, who's our advocate according to the Bible? It's Jesus. So I believe that he was advocating for Job, presenting himself before God, advocating for Job, and then Satan is making accusations. Why? God was bragging about Job and saying, have you seen him? He's just the best. And then what does Satan do? He makes an accusation, accuses Job, and calls God a liar. He says, well, he would curse you. If it wasn't for you giving him everything, he would curse you the moment you took everything away from him. So he didn't believe God. If you don't believe what God is saying, then what is that called? That's called thinking they're a liar. They're lying. Right? And that's what Satan does. He lies and he twists. Okay? Now, mankind was altering the image. And then we get into, what is it? Job 38? Job 38:7. Let's take a look at that, shall we? Okay. And while the morning stars sang together. So we're going to take a look at this. Let's go to NKJV. That's my favorite one. All right, so we're going to start on Job 38, verse 1, okay? Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, who is this who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? So you don't have knowledge. You don't understand anything. You're dumb. Now prepare yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. And let me tell you what, when God asks you questions, probably best to keep your mouth shut because you don't know the answer, okay? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. And so, give me 1 second. I'm going to go here. Let's just scroll down here for a second. Okay. And back to Job 38. Okay. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? To what were its foundations fastened? Or who laid its cornerstone? Who's the cornerstone of earth? Oh, Jesus. Interesting. When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Well, who's the bright and morning star? First of all, we're going to take a look at this in Hebrew, right? Because it doesn't say the morning stars, it says the morning star, right? It says, Baren Yachad Kahol Boker, the star. It actually says, Yachad Kochob Kochbe, however you say it, Boker. When the morning star, and it actually says morning star, shouted, Vayarichu, called upon, all, and then it says the Bnei Elohim, shouted for joy, all the Bnei Elohim, okay? So what we see here is it says when the morning star, now we know in the book of Revelation it says Jesus is the bright and morning star. So we have the bright and morning star shouting for joy with all the sons of God. Now, in this context, the sons of God, I believe, would be humankind. And people will say, oh, well, that can't be the case because Job 38 is talking about when God created everything and mankind wasn't there when God created everything. Or so we think. And then he says, or who shut in the sea with doors when it burst forth and issued from the womb, when I made the clouds its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band, when I fixed my limit for it and set bars and doors, when I said, this far you may come, but no further, and here your proud waves must stop. Have you commanded the morning since your day's beginning and caused the dawn to know its place, that it might take hold of the ends of the earth and the wicked be shaken out of it? Okay, so we see this mirrored in Proverbs chapter 8, and I'm going to start at verse 17, all right? I love all who love me. Those who search will surely find me. I have riches and honor, as well as enduring wealth and justice. My gifts are better than gold, even the purest gold. My wages better than sterling silver. I walk in righteousness and paths of justice. Those who love me inherit wealth. I will fill their treasuries. Who does that? The Lord, God, Jehovah. The Lord formed me from the beginning, before he created anything else. Really? What's that say? Proverbs 8:22. Let's see what it actually says in Hebrew. This is what happens when I wake up and I start doing Bible studies first thing in the morning, okay? Proverbs 8:22 in Hebrew. Jehovah Cha'ani Reshit Darko. It actually says, Jehovah possessed me at the beginning of his way, before his works from then. So, in here when it says, he formed me from the beginning, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say he was formed from the beginning. It says he possessed me, he owned me, I was his, I already existed. I was coexistent with him from the beginning, before he created anything. That's the word. So we understand, this tells us that this is Jesus speaking here. I was appointed in ages past, at the very first, before the earth began. So Jesus was already appointed. He already had his own thing going on here. I'm going to pull this up in that New King James and read it from there. Okay? It says, the Lord possessed me at the beginning of his way, before his works of old. I have been established from everlasting, from the beginning, before there was ever an earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no fountains abounding with water, before the mountains were settled, before the hills, I was brought forth. While as yet he had not made the earth or the fields or the primal dust of the world, when he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep, when he established the clouds above, when he strengthened the fountains of the deep, when he assigned to the sea its limits, so that the waters would not transgress his command. Wait a second, isn't that sounding like Job 38? Listen to Job 38. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Who determined the measurements? Surely you know. Who stretched a line upon it? To what were its foundations fastened? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and the sons of God shouted for joy. Who shut in the sea with doors? When I burst forth and issued from the womb. When I made the clouds its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band. When I fixed my limit for it and set bars and doors. Let me go to Proverbs 8 again. I have been established everlasting from the beginning, before there was ever an earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no fountains abounding with water, before the mountains were settled, before the hills, I was brought forth. While as yet he had not made the earth or the fields or the primal dust. When he prepared the heavens, I was there. So in the beginning, God did what? He created the what? The heavens and the earth. All right? I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep. Boom, added here. I was there. When he established the clouds above, strengthened the fountains of the deep, and assigned the sea to his limits. That goes right back to Job 38. Right? It says he shut in the sea with doors, when it burst forth and issued from the womb, when I made the clouds its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band, when I fixed my limit for it and set bars and doors. And I said, you may come no further, and your proud waves must stop. Interesting. He assigned the sea to his limits. This is back to Proverbs 8. So that the waters would not transgress his command. When he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him as a master craftsman, and I was daily his delight. Daily his delight, rejoicing in his inhabited world, and my delight was with the sons of man. So, Jesus was rejoicing? What is that word for rejoicing that's going on here? Let's take a look here. He was rejoicing. What does that mean? Does that mean he was celebrating? Maybe singing? It's the word mashiachet. Mesachichet. I don't know how to pronounce it. Laughed, played, mocked, rejoiced, laughed, played, celebrated. It could also mean to deride or have in division, to make merry, rejoice, to play. It can also mean to mock or scorn. Okay, so he was rejoicing in the inhabited world. It actually says he was rejoicing in Tabel, which is the confusion. So that would probably be in a proper context, saying that he was mocking hell, deriding hell, right? And Arsho, his world, Aresho, okay, the earth, okay. And then it says, Vasa asue et benech Adam, pay, end. So it says here, and his delight, his pleasure, his enjoyment. So he was mocking hell, and his delight, pleasure, and enjoyment was with who? The sons of God. Isn't that interesting? So then we look at that in context, and it comes from the word shaya or sha'ah, right? So let's see what that means. It can mean some weird things sometimes. It means to cry out. So he was crying out, rejoicing with the sons of God. It can also mean to fondle, to please, or to amuse, to look about, to stare at, or cry, or delight in. So he was playing, amused, enjoying, rejoicing with the sons of Adam, the Bnei Adam. That's what it literally says. So we see the correlation here between Genesis or Job 38 and the correlation between Proverbs 8 that lets us know that all things were created through Jesus, that nothing was created without him. That lines up with John 1:1. And that he mocks hell, because it does say that he mocks his enemies. He laughs at them, he scorns them, he mocks, derides them, etc. Okay? And he was delighting in the sons of man. And then it says here, the B'nai Elohim in Job 33, when the morning star, Jesus, sang together, and all of the sons of God shouted for joy. Okay? So even let's take another look at that in Hebrew. Okay? So it's Beran, when sang Yachad Chachob, when the morning star sang, and Vayariu Kal B'nai Elohim, the sons of God. When it sang the morning star together, when together sang the morning star and the sons of God all shouted for joy. And that's Vayariu, to shout, to cry out, to make a loud noise, to sound the alarm, to split the ears, to make a battle cry, to make a joyful noise, to shout for joy, to shout in triumph. Okay? So it's very similar to the word that they used here with Sheah or Sheyasue. Okay? So we see here that Jesus was singing, the morning star, the bright and morning star, was singing with the sons of God. And then Proverbs 8 makes it more specific and says he was delighting in and rejoicing with or shouting with the sons of man. Well, all throughout the Bible, the B'nai Elohim are referred to as sons of man. So now we've established who are the Nephilim, that's fallen angels, and who are the sons of God. They're men that at one point rejoiced with Jesus. What sons of man were rejoicing with Jesus at the time of creation? Adam and Eve. So those sons of God at that point were probably Adam and Eve. So you've got Jesus, the B'nai Elohim, and then you've got Adam and Eve, the B'nai Elohim. And then you've got us, who have been given the authority to be called B'nai Elohim, or sons of God. That's not a name that we share with angels. Okay. Now, who are the Gibborim? And we're going to go here. Going back up to Genesis chapter 6 to the New King James Version. There were giants on the earth in those days. Again, terrible translation. It doesn't say giants. It says there were Nephilim. That means fallen ones, fallen angels. They're the only ones that fell from heaven. Even Adam and Eve weren't kicked out of heaven. They were kicked out of Eden. They were kicked out of paradise. I have a sore in my mouth that is making me say my words weird, because every now and then I hit it on the edge of my cheek and my teeth, and it just makes me go. It was worse the other day. It's not bad now, comparatively speaking. So there were Nephilim on the earth in those days, and also afterward. Let's take a look at that. Hebrew. Got to pull it up. Of course, it's going a little slow because this is an important verse. Ha Nephilim chayu. So the Nephilim existed or were ba'aresh, on the earth, on the land, bayim, in those days. Bayim, in those, it literally means in those days, chahem, of them. In those days of them. Chahem is what that, hem means them. Or, those, them, they, those, right? So, in those days. All right? And then it's Varam. And also, Achare Ken Asher Yabo. And when came in the sons of God, the B'nai Ha Elohim, which we've established are men, into the daughters of Adam, which are the altered daughters of altered men that we see in Genesis 6, chapter 1. And they bore unto themselves vayaledu. So they bore these children, they had these children to them. Lachem, Chema, Ha Gibborim. They bore children to them. Those were the mighty men, the Ha Gibborim, who were of old men of renown. And what's that word? It's Anshe Hashem. Men of the name? Well, why is it all of a sudden that Hashem means men of the name? It means men of renown. It means men of the mark. The Gibborim are the men of the mark or renown. Those are the children of the altered sons of man, Cha-Adam, the Huchal Cha-Adam in Genesis chapter 6, 1. These are the children of them. That's the Gibborim. They're the giants. We will see these Gibborim mentioned in, I have to find it here, in Ezekiel, I want to say Ezekiel 38, Ezekiel 28. Nope, that's when Satan was the seal of perfection. I have it here somewhere. Oh, no, we're not looking at that. That's Job. We're already finished with Job. Here it is. Ezekiel 32. I want to say it's Ezekiel 32:29. I just want to be sure. Ezekiel 32:28. Okay, so let's read it in English first, and then we'll go in depth on it here. It's my rabbit noises. They do not lie with the mighty who are fallen. This is verse 27. They do not lie with the mighty who are fallen of the uncircumcised, who have gone down to hell with their weapons of war. They have laid their swords under their heads, but their iniquities will be on their bones, because of the terror of the mighty in the land of the living. Yes, you shall be broken in the midst of the uncircumcised, and lie with those slain by the sword. All right, so 27 is an important one here. Let's go and take a look at this. We know that they're saying that they've gone down to hell. It says, Valo yishkebu, and not do lie down at the Gibborim. So you do not lie down with the Gibborim, who are fallen of the uncircumcised. Ma'arelim, who have gone down to hell. Well, that's interesting. It says here, It's the word Nephilim, who are fallen of the uncircumcised, ma'arelim. So let's take a look at that. Yep, of those who are uncircumcised. They do not lie with the... Oh, it's the Gibborim, the mighty who are fallen of the uncircumcised, who have gone down to hell, with weapons of their war. And they have laid their swords under their heads, but will be their iniquities on their bones, because of the terror of the mighty in the land of the living. The Gibborim ba'aresh hayim, in the earth, in the land of the living. Okay, so then we go to verse 28. So, and yes, in the midst of the uncircumcised shall be broken and lie with those who are slain by the sword, those who are altered. There is Edom, her kings, and all her princes, who are laid, despite their might, beside the slain of the sword. They with the uncircumcised shall lay with and go down to the pit. So they've gone down to hell. There are the princes of the north, all of them, and all of the Sidonians who have gone down with the slain, at the terror which they caused by their might. Ha-giburatem, right? In shame they will lie, uncircumcised, with the slain by the sword, and bear the shame with those who go down to the pit. Okay? Them will see Pharaoh and be comforted over all his multitude, slain by the sword, Pharaoh and all his army, says the Lord Adonai Jehovah. So they all go down to the pit. For I have caused my terror in the land of the living, and he shall be placed in the midst of the uncircumcised, with those slain by the sword. Chalel chareb. It's interesting that it's the word halal again, which means pierced, wounded, or polluted. Okay? So that's very interesting. Profaned, slain, slew, deadly, wounded, killed, profaned. It's interesting that this the same word here. But we see in this context here that this is talking about the mighty ones of the earth, and they're the Ha-Gibborim also, so they go down. Let's go back to 28 so we can get a little bit better understanding of that, because that's a very interesting little tidbit that I haven't seen before. They not, valo yishkebu, they do not lie with the mighty of the fallen. Okay, so let's go back and see what the context is here. Bible study with Robin. All right. They have set their head in the midst of the slain with all her multitude, with her graves all around it, and all of the uncircumcised slain by the swords. Oh, interesting. That's a description of hell, actually. It says they are the Meshech and Tubal, and that means Tubal is the word for hell. So they're talking about all of the pits and graves that are in hell, and there's lines and rows of pits in hell. Super interesting. Come across this here. They are the Meshech. That looks like the word Mashiach. So what is that? They are dragged to hell. Okay, that means they're dragged to hell. And so they are dragged to hell, and all the multitudes around it, with all of their graves, all of them uncircumcised, slain by the sword, though they caused their terror in the land of the living. Okay, so even though they were terrible in the land of the living. So this makes me think that this is talking about demons. But they do not lie with the fallen warriors of old. They don't lie with the Gibborim, who went down to the realm of the dead with their weapons of war. They do not lie with the mighty Gibborim, fallen of the uncircumcised. But it's interesting that they use the word Nephilim instead of Nephilim's pronunciation. So we have to go into the context here. This is talking about being cast down in this context. They do not lie with the Gibborim who were cast down of the uncircumcised, who have gone down into hell, Sheol, with the weapons, Bichle Milchatam, Vayitenu, et Barboltam, with their swords under their heads. And interesting. So we see here that these ones who are fallen, right? They don't go down and rest, right? They're not hanging out with these Gibborim. So we see here these Gibborim are in hell as well. That's super interesting. All right. So anyway, we got to get back on track here. That was very interesting. So the Gibborim are the heroes of old, the men of renown, right? These are they're not the fallen ones. The angels in Genesis 6 are the fallen ones, the Nephilim, right? We've covered that. They're cast down. Then we have the Gibborim, who are cast down into hell also. So now we have to go into what were they altering or transforming. So we're going to actually have to go to Romans chapter 1, we're going to start at verse 20, and we're going to work our way down from there, okay? And this is going to give us an idea of what was happening, who was being altered, and what they were exchanging or altering, right? Okay, so we start at Romans 1:20, and it says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse." The New Living Translation says, so they have no excuse for not knowing God, right? And that's actually what he's talking about here, is they have no excuse for not believing in God. And then we go to verse 21, which says, "For although they knew God," so we're talking about, he gives us a time frame. So from the beginning, God's been seen. Everybody can see it. There's no reason not to believe in God. "For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him, but their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened." Okay? "And although they claimed to be wise, they became fools." Now we're talking about the people at the beginning of the time. And it says here, "And exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal human being, and birds and animals and reptiles." So what did they exchange? It's the word alaxin. It says they changed the glory. It says they exchanged, transformed, or altered, according to the Strong's Concordance. They made different. So they made their image different. They exchanged the glory of God. Well, 1 Corinthians, do not cover your head. 1 Corinthians. It's actually in the verse that says, women cover your heads, men don't cover your heads, etc. It says, "Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head." Gotta get to "A man should not wear," go to the New King James, "a man indeed ought not cover his head, for as much as he is the image and glory of God." So if we are the image and we are the glory, our image is the glory of God, right? Because our image is his image. So we see here in Romans 1:23, they exchanged, transformed, or altered the glory of the immortal God. So we're the image and glory. So they exchanged that into what? A likeness of an image. Of what? Of man and beast, bird and quadruped, tetrapodon, and herpeton. Herpeton means creeping things. It's talking about lizards, reptiles, snakes. So what did they exchange their image for? They exchanged the image of God, so us looking like human beings, for the image of man with bird, and with quadrupeds, meaning, animals with 4 legs, and reptiles and lizards. So they exchanged the image of God, us as human beings, in exchange to look like man mixed with birds, animals, and reptiles/lizards. Isn't that interesting? Now, where do we see that again? Jude 1:7. And people like to go to Jude and say, "Oh, Jude 1 says this. This is what was happening in Sodom and Gomorrah. They were doing what Sodom and Gomorrah. They were seeking after their strange." But it says, "Hos Sodoma kai Gomorrah." Okay, just as Sodom and Gomorrah, kai hai peri autas, and the cities around them, polis, ton homoianon. So in like manner, or in the same manner, tropon, with them, tutois, ek pornuse, indulged in sexual immorality. It's the word porn, right? Having gone after flesh strange. So they went and committed sexual immorality, porn, fornication, with altered flesh. The word for strange here is heteros. Heteros means other than, another, or different flesh. Meaning different from what? Different from human flesh. Okay? The word heteros means another but distinct kind. It stands in contrast to allos, which means another of the same kind. Heteros is another of a completely different kind or quality. It emphasizes qualitatively that it's qualitatively different from its counterpart in comparison. Okay? Now, the word heteros means altered or transformed or different. So they sought after altered sarkos, altered flesh. Well, then we get to Revelation 12. I want to say it's verse 17. And we'll pop that up here in a second. And it says, "And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus." So that's us. That's Christians. So he wants to wage war with Christians. Is that what it says? Well, let's take a look in the Greek. It says, "Kai orgiste," he was angry. Hodrakon, the dragon. Epite gyneke. Okay, so he was angry. The dragon was angry with the woman. And Apolethon poetese palman went to make war meta with, meta means altered or transformed, the rest of the spermatos otes. So he went to make war, altering the rest of the sperm or seed, the spermatos, the seed, the children of her. Of who? The woman. So he went to wage war, altering the seed of woman. Where does that come back into play? Genesis 3:15, the seed war. It goes right back to the seed war, right? So he went to alter her. And then the word tone, which means what? He tried to alter or transform, keeping the commandments of God and holding the testimony of Jesus, and he stood up upon the sand of the sea. So not only is he trying to alter or transform the seed of the woman, he's also trying to alter or transform the church. Interesting. Very interesting, I think. All right. So now we see there's an alteration that's happening. Now this also ties in to Genesis chapter 11. Now if you remember, we talked about the word huhal, and that means to alter or transform also. And people say, well, if that's the case, if they were just, mixing with animals, which we see in Genesis chapter 6 again, by the way, let me get right to Genesis chapter 6 here. When God starts to destroy, Genesis, God destroyed all with breath. Okay, so it's Genesis 6, so I'm going to say around verse 17. So we're going to go to verse 14 here, right? "And God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood, make rooms in the ark, and cover it inside and outside with pitch. And this is how you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, in width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. You shall make a window for the ark, and you shall finish it to a cubit from above, and set the door of the ark in its side. You shall make it with lower, second, and third decks. And behold, I myself am bringing floodwaters on the earth to destroy from under the heaven all flesh, in which is the breath of life. Everything that is on the earth shall die. But I'll establish my covenant with you, and you shall go into the ark for your sons and wives, and blah, blah, blah. The living end of all flesh from the ark." Let's see. Okay, here it is. Verse 19. "And every living thing of flesh you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark, and keep them with you." Now we know in chapter 7 it says 2 pairs of the unclean and 7 pairs of the clean. So it wasn't just taking 2 of every animal. It was taking pairs and multiple pairs of every animal. "And of every living thing of flesh you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark, and keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. of the birds after their kind, of the animals of their kind, and every creeping thing of the earth after its kind, 2 of every kind shall come to you. Okay, so we got to find this verse here. All right, I think it's back in chapter 6, but I might have to keep reading more. I'm sorry, I'm trying to lose your spot. It says, and God destroyed the man and beast and this, that. I'm just going to straight up Google it. I'm just going off the cuff here now. Obviously, I'm not. This isn't part of what I brought him, but this is what needs to be talked about. Chapter 7. Oh, it's verse 7. Okay. And here he says, listen to this. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thought of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord, I wonder if that's the same. We're going to have to take a look at that real quick here in Hebrew. Sorry, folks. And the Lord saw how great the wickedness of man was. So these are the creatures he saw. Okay, so Vayar Yahovah Chai Rabba Re'at Ha'adam Ba'aresh, of the man. So this is probably talking about altered men again. And every intent of their thoughts of his heart was altogether evil all the time. Those are demons, folks. Oh, yeah. That's demons. Okay. So, the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent and thought of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and creeping thing and birds of the air. Isn't that interesting? Doesn't that sound a little bit like what we were just seeing in Romans? Let me find the right one here. Okay, so they exchanged. We'll go into Greek here. Here's Romans 1:23. They altered or exchanged, transformed the glory of the immortal God into the likeness and image of man and bird, man and beast, man and creeping thing. Okay? And then we go back to Genesis here. And he said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along ground. So let's look at that in Hebrew. You always have to go back in Hebrew because the translation gets so destroyed sometimes. Vayomer Yehovah emach at ha'adam asher barati me'al pnei ha'adama me'adam. Okay, so he will destroy from the face of the earth man and beast, me'adam, at Behemoth, and creeping things. So at creeping things, at oaf. So he's going to destroy man and bird and beast. And what does he say here? Man and bird and beast and creeping thing. And what does he say in Genesis chapter 6? Man and burst and creeping, man and bird and creeping thing. And it's the word remesh. And it literally means a reptile or any other lizard, right? And then in Romans, it says, and creeping things, it uses the word herpeton. Well, the word herpeton means creeping creature, especially a reptile or a serpent. So we see Genesis 6, verse 7, parallels to Romans chapter 1, verse 23, parallels to Jude chapter 1, only chapter, verse 7, parallels to Revelation 12:17, which then parallels back to Genesis 3:15, and it all goes back to the beginning. Is this not one of the most interesting things that you've heard? Because this is a very in-depth, you're going to have to go back and rewatch this and reread this, or go and look at the verses and see for yourself. It's all there. But you can also buy it in the book, The Mark of the Beast, From Creation to Revelation, right? So the idea, they made, Nero burned down the city. His name was the number 666. Here's what 666 actually represents, okay? 666 is 1 part human, 2 parts animal. So meaning 1/3 human, that's 33333.33333, and then the mark of the beast, which is 2/3, which is 0.666 line over it, which is what has to deal with genetics. They said that Nimrod was 1/3 man, 2/3 demon or god, and the gods are the fallen, disembodied spirits of the Gibborim, or what we would call Rephaim. How do I know that? Isaiah chapter 14 talks about when Satan goes to hell, the spirits of the dead, the word for spirits of the dead is Rephaim. The spirits of the Rephaim meet him there and greet him there. And in Peter, those same spirits are called the prison guards. And then in Ezekiel 28, those are the fallen Gibborim, which are in hell. Or cast down Gibborim, whatever. So then we go to Genesis chapter 11, and this is where we see that the emergence of the Gibborim appears. Now, they believe that the Tower of Babel was a triangular, pyramidal-shaped kind of steep, kind of like what you would see in a ziggurat or some sort of Mesopotamian, Middle Eastern pyramid from about 4000 BC, okay? So you go to Genesis chapter 11. Now the whole earth had one language and one speech, and it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly." Okay, so they're making bricks, okay? They had brick for stone, and they had asphalt for mortar. Well, I looked into this, and I thought, what are the odds that the tower that they were building was triangular? And I discovered that that's what most of these buildings were shaped like, triangular. The word for bricks is the word Laban, which means white, so they were making white bricks, so white stone bricks, right? And then they were sealing them with asphalt or bitumen. Okay, now I looked this up. What did the pyramid look like when it was originally built? It was white brick. There's a formula they have that they discovered that showed how they could make giant bricks out of limestone that they made. So they had the ability to make rocks. They made bricks from these rocks, from stuff that they had nearby. And the Geopolymer Institute actually found the actual formula in hieroglyphs, translated it, and used it, and made these blocks of limestone. And guess what? I said, what was the pyramid sealed with? The pyramid was sealed with asphalt or bitumen. Why? To make it waterproof. And I know other people have said, oh, the pyramids were here before the flood. I don't believe that. I believe that the pyramids were built at this time of Nimrod. And if they were built as Egyptian towers, then they were, the reason is because Mizraim, or Egypt, as we would say, was the uncle of Nimrod. So they were all working together. They all had one language. They were all from the line of Ham. Okay? They said, let us make a brick for stone and asphalt for mortar. And they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Okay, when that says a tower whose top is in the heavens, it's Vamigdala Varoshna Hashemayim. And that word Varoshna there means and the top, or and the head, technically. But it's actually its own word. All right? It's Varoshal, and its top is in. So this word Rosh in this context doesn't mean the top or the head. It means a band, captain, or company. What? Who has a captain or a band or a company? A chief? A company? So they could put people where? In the heavens. They built a tower to put people into the heavens. But then here's the next part. And it says, let us make for ourselves a what? Let's make ourselves, lanu, vaneashe, klanu shem, pen nupush, Al pnei kal ha'aresh. Let's make for ourselves a name, a mark, an image, memorial, or renown. Let's make our own renown. Let's make our own image. Ooh, are you getting this? Let's make our own image. Right? That's what it says. Now we go back to chapter 10, and it says, and Nimrod became a Gibborim. All right, I'm going to find this, right? It says, and this is chapter 10, verse 8, Cush begat Nimrod, who began to be a mighty one on the earth. Now, if we go back and read this in Hebrew, remember, in the beginning, we see the word huhel, or hulel, or however you want to say it. I get it mixed up. All right, so, Vachush Yalad, so just like in Genesis chapter 6, when they Yaladu or Yaladenu bore to them, bore to them, Et Nimrod, the one who is Nimrod, okay? Who began, here's that word again, Chahel, doesn't mean began. It means profaned, defiled, polluted, desecrated, right? So he polluted what? Polluted himself. Altered, wounded, stained, polluted himself. To be, lichyot, gibor, ha'aresh. He polluted himself to be a mighty one. To be a gibor. To be really the first gibor. And it again is the word chaya. Lachayot. Chaya. To become. He polluted himself to become a gibor, a mighty one on the earth. A man of renown. The mighty ones were the men of renown. Of what? The men of Hashem. The men of their own name, their own mark, their own image. You see in this correlation? This isn't being taught. Nobody that I've seen is teaching this. He altered himself, polluted himself to become a Gibborim. And of course, if you read the Antiquities of the Jews by Flavius Josephus, who was a first century historian / Jewish man, he says Nimrod was the leader of all of this stuff, and he was doing all this stuff, encouraging them to get involved with all of this and go along with his plan. He was the source of all of this. So he polluted himself, altered his image, altered the image of God in exchange to look like a demon. To become a giant, to become a Gibborim. And then they say, well, let's build this big tower and make it waterproof. Why? Again, Flavius Josephus covers this and says that he was making a tower and making it waterproof so that if God tried to flood the world again in their rebellion, they could laugh in his face and that they would not be flooded by and destroyed in their wickedness. And that's where the origin of the rainbow flag even comes from, as a mockery to God. There's more to the rainbow flag. I won't get into that right now. But that's it. Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make an image, name, renown, a Hashem for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down and saw what the sons of men, the Ha'adam, had done again. They had built. And the Lord said, indeed, the people are one, and they all have one language, and this is what they begin to do? I wonder what that word for begin to do is. I bet you it's the word chulha. Let's see. Let's see. Maybe it's a completely different word. And so, Vachiared Yehovah lerotz et Cha'ir, the city, Va'et Chamigdal, and the tower, Asher Banu B'nei Adam. Okay, the sons of God. Vayomer Yehovah Chen am echad, v'sefa achat, luchalam, va'izach Chahilim. Oh, yes, there it is. Chahilam. It's the word. And they began to defile and pollute themselves again. Ooh, that is something. They began to defile themselves to do this thing. La ashot. To do this. To perform the act. They began to perform the act to pollute themselves. Now, nothing will be withheld from them. So God came down and said, look at this. They're so evil. They've come down and started to do this thing again. And then it says, and now nothing will restrain them. Isn't that interesting? So they had that technology. If you actually go and you read into the history, you read about the Vedas, all this stuff that they have the historical information showing that there was advanced technology at the time of Nimrod, that they had ships and stuff, that they were actually traveling. They had cocoa before we had cocoa. They had corn, which was only found in North America after Columbus had explored the Americas, etc. So the 1400s, 15th century, 16th century, they had corn. There's images of spaceships, flying cars, tanks, etc. in the pyramids, etc. They found a model airplane inside the tomb of one of the pharaohs that they built it as though it were an airplane, the model, and it flies like a glider, but it flies. So they have all this technology. They had the ability to alter seed, alter DNA, and they started out doing it the first way through sexual impurity and through fornication, and then they transferred over to doing it with this technology. Then everything within 140 years after Nimrod goes back to now they're breeding with these creatures again because they weren't all destroyed. It doesn't say that God destroyed them all when he shook the earth and separated the continents and divided their tongues. It doesn't say he destroyed everybody. So they were still there. They were still reproducing at that point and at that time, right? And that's where the giants come from that were in the Fertile Crescent at that time. It wasn't because angels had fallen again and were breeding. Now, people will say, well, what about Enoch? The book of Enoch says this. The book of Enoch says that. Let's go into the book of... I don't believe that the book of Enoch is inspired. And pretty much every biblical scholar will say the book of Enoch's not inspired. There's too many discrepancies in it, too many things that are wrong that don't line up with Scripture. And if you read the book of Enoch, most of it is gnosis, right? And they'll say, well, we found the book of Enoch in the Dead Sea Scrolls. No, they didn't. They did not. They found, I think it's either 4 lines or 4 paragraphs, whatever it is, either between 1 and 4 paragraphs from what they call the book of Enoch. Pretty hard to say that you found the book of Enoch when you just found a small snippet of something in that. And guess what? The book of Enoch was originally the oldest version of the book of Enoch, supposedly was found at the Dead Sea Scrolls, which was written at about 200 AD. Nowhere in the Bible, all right? The reason that Enoch is not even considered canonical is because it was written well after the Bible. It said that there were no more words of revelation given after the last chapter of the Bible until the New Testament. God was silent, basically, according to the Bible, right? Now, let's take a look at Enoch chapter 13. It says, the angels could no longer speak to God or be in his presence after Enoch's report to them of judgment. Well, this directly contradicts the book of Job. Job mentions the name Casita. Casita shows us that this is in the time of the founding fathers of Israel, the patriarchs, the 12, 13, 14 descendants, whatever. I know we say the 12 sons, but it actually counts Manasseh as being one of the tribes and Levi not being a tribe. So just think about that. So that contradicts Job, which happened in the time of the patriarchs, where it says that Satan was in the presence of God. And that's in Job chapter 1 and 2. Chapter 13 of Enoch also says, Enoch went to the land of Dan, to the Mount Hermon. That land wasn't even known as the land of Dan in Enoch's time. It didn't exist. Dan didn't exist. Right? It didn't exist. So how did he go to a land that didn't even exist? It didn't even exist for another 2,000 years-ish or so after Enoch was gone to heaven. It also mentions the country of Lebanon, which also didn't exist until well after the flood. All right, chapter 14 of Enoch says, no angel could look at the face of God. It says, no angel can look at the face of God. But then in Matthew, Gabriel says he stands before the face of God. And Matthew 18:10 says, the angels see the face of God always. So these are glaring contradictions. Look, Enoch says, I saw the view of the face of the Lord. So this is in the next chapter. I saw the view of the face of the Lord. So what is it, Enoch? You can see the face of God or you cannot see the face of God. Now, if you can look at the face of God and see the face of God, then the Bible is a lie in Exodus 33, probably 33, somewhere around there, when God says that no man can see the face of God and live. He tells that to Moses. But here we have Enoch saying, in one chapter, nobody can look at the face of God. And then in the next chapter, I saw the face of the Lord, like iron, burning hot in a fire and brought out. And it emits sparks, and it is incandescent. Thus even I saw the face of the Lord, but the face of the Lord is not to be talked about. It's so very marvelous and supremely awesome and supremely frightening. And who am I to give an account of the incomprehensible being of the Lord and of his face? Of course you can't. Of course you can't give an account like that. Because no living man can see the face of God. So we have another glaring contradiction. And we're just going to look over this as though everything that we're being told in the book of Enoch is a fact. That he knew what he was talking about when he contradicts the Bible, and he multiple places contradicts the Bible. Okay? If you ask me, this was mythology that was passed down through the Jews. It was actually not even considered Canaan ever by any Jew. Ever was it considered Canaan. It was considered a literary work, meaning it was a fictitious book that was written. And poorly written at that, because it doesn't even collaborate with the Bible. Anything that contradicts the Bible in any way is false. Okay? False. Period. I don't believe that we as Christians should be quoting the book of Enoch as though it's Canaan. Right? So anyway, and who am I to give an account of the incomprehensible being of the Lord and of his face, so extremely strange and indescribable, yet you were just describing it. And how many are his commands and his multiple voice, and the Lord's throne, supremely great and not made by hands, and the choir stalls all around him, the cherubim, the seraphim armies, and their never silent singing. Who can give an account of his beautiful appearance, never changing and indescribable, and his great glory? And I fell down flat and did obeisance to the Lord. The Bible tells you, no man may see God's face, but he said in Exodus 33:20, you cannot see my face, for no man shall see me and live. John 14:12, no one has ever seen the face of God. But if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us. Enoch chapter 14, verse 21 through 23 says, was whiter than any snow. None of the angels could enter and could behold his face by reason of the magnificence and glory, and no flesh could behold him. What? That's completely contradicting even what we just read. The flaming fire was round about him, and a great fire stood before him, and none around could draw nigh to him 10,000 times. He states that no angel and no man could see the face of God, yet in a later verse, Enoch says he saw the face of God. Matthew 18:10, it says, take heed that you despise not one of these little ones, for I say unto you that in heaven their angels always behold the face of God, the face of my Father, which is in heaven. So who is it? Who's the liar, Enoch or Jesus? That would be Enoch. It's contradicting Jesus. That's a false prophet or a liar. Right? Enoch 15:4 declares that God said angels mated with women. That's not in the Bible either. Not biblical. They did not. They cannot. They don't have phalluses. They don't have the ability. There's neither male or female. And how come it was only the men that did it? Because there's angels in heaven that look like women. Why don't they just reproduce with each other then? And make pure spirit beings, right? They can't. They don't have the body parts. I know 2 people that have been to heaven, and they said that no one has reproductive organs in heaven, okay? And the Kevin Zadai said the same thing. I've heard it from actually more than 2 people. But they don't have reproductive parts. So the whole thing where LA is like, so what happens when you get up there? They're just gone? Hello? Yeah, actually. Hello? That's actually what happens. Gone. No male or female in the spirit. Unless you're in hell, then I think there's the illusion that there is, because they're doing things down there that are terrible, horrible tortures, right? This would mean that if God spoke and said that the angels bred with women, that this is contradictory to what the Word of God says, and thus this is a lie. This makes God a liar. And that's what happens in the Gnostic Gospels. Gnostic Gospels sound like Christian Gospels, but they make God a liar. They change things a little bit. They say, oh, well, Jesus wasn't actually crucified. He had somebody else be crucified in his place. Or Jesus didn't actually die. He came down, and he was treated, and he came back. And stuff like that. Yeah, all that stuff happened for Jesus. He was crucified and resurrected, but also he had a wife that was Mary Magdalene, who was a prostitute that he was sleeping with, and he had children with her. Right. So the Bible teaches that mankind altered or transformed and exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for the image of man and beast and serpent and reptile. So this is what we're talking about. This is what was going on back then. These are the things I would love to hear Kevin Zadai teach on this, because I would love to hear the confirmation. I would love to hear him say, this is what's happening. I would also love to have a discussion about this to see if and where I'm off in certain things, or share my perspective on this. But nevertheless, that. I wouldn't, if I had to ask questions, if I had an opportunity to ask him questions, it probably wouldn't be about this stuff. I actually don't have any questions. You start taking his courses, and your questions run out, because he tells you everything. It's basically mentorship. He tells you everything, and he's teaching you everything. It's all in the Bible. It's good stuff. So it doesn't really leave you with a necessity for questions. So anyway, that's all for today. Sorry, I took an hour and a half to explain this. I hope that this is great. I hope you love this, and I hope that it makes you mad. And you go into the scripture, and you start to tear everything apart that I was saying. Read all of the scriptures, ask all of the questions. I want you to be angry and look this up. Because when I first heard, well, fallen angels weren't having sex with human beings, I thought, ridiculous. That's completely contradictory to what everybody teaches. You should not base what you know on what other people are teaching. You should base what you know on the Word of God. And when I actually dug into this, that's when I wrote the book, The Mark of the Beast, From Creation to Revelation. Because it's there. It's there from Genesis all the way to the book of Revelation, all the way to the end. All right, guys. Love you guys. Be blessed. Share this with your friends and family. Send it to people that you think are experts, please. And say, hey, tear this apart. Destroy this. Take it apart word for word. Contradict this. Show him that he's false. I want to be proven wrong. I would love it. I love when people come to me with things and I have to think about it more, because that's how all of this came to be in the first place. All right. Love you guys. Be blessed. Have a great day. I have to probably get the dog started real soon and try and get everything done before the kids are awake. And I've been awake since 1 o'clock in the morning and praying and teaching. So I've been doing this for the past 5 hours. Love you guys. Be blessed. And I will see you again probably Monday. Until next time. Bye.